Breaking: Netanyahu just destroyed karma on live television with an accusation so devastating that Parliament erupted in absolute chaos. The Israeli Prime Minister called Britain's leader a betrayer of democracy who abandoned civilization itself, and what happened next has ministers plotting Starmer's immediate removal. This could end Labour's government in 72 hours. If you want to see how Britain's worst diplomatic crisis unfolds, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is happening faster than anyone predicted. Here's what sparked the international meltdown. 3 days ago, Starmer announced Britain would halt all arms exports to Israel, effective immediately. His words were brutal. Israel must face consequences for what he called disproportionate actions, but Netanyahu wasn't having it. The Israeli leader didn't send diplomats or issue statements. He went nuclear instead. At exactly 2:47 p.m. British time, Netanyahu appeared on every major news network simultaneously. His opening words sent shockwaves through Westminster. Karma has chosen terrorism over democracy. While Israeli children hide in bomb shelters and our families bury their dead, the British Prime Minister rewards those who celebrate our slaughter. Netanyahu's voice cracked with rage. This isn't diplomacy, this is betrayal of the highest order. He held up photographs of October 7th victims. These people trusted Britain would stand against barbarism. Starmer spat on their graves. The broadcast lasted 12 minutes. Every second was calculated destruction. Netanyahu revealed classified intelligence showing British weapons intercepted heading to Hamas through third parties. He claimed Starmer ignored warnings from MI6 about the consequences. Most devastating, he produced WhatsApp messages allegedly from Labour MPs celebrating damage to Israel's defence capabilities. Your own party, Netanyahu declared, contains members who want Jewish blood on their hands. But that wasn't even the worst part. Netanyahu then revealed something that sent Defence Secretary John Healey running from the chamber. We have recordings, Netanyahu said slowly, deliberately, conversations between senior Labour officials discussing how to frame Israel for war crimes. He played 15 seconds of audio, a British voice clearly discussing fabricating evidence. The accent was unmistakably Birmingham Labour MP Tahir Ali's constituency. The recording continued with discussions about coordinating with UN officials to ensure maximum damage. This is your government, Netanyahu thundered. These are the people Starmer protects. While British citizens in Israel fear for their lives, the Israeli embassy in London confirmed 1,200 British nationals currently in Israel, many elderly visiting family. They're now trapped because flights are suspended. Margaret Thompson, 73, from Leeds, told BBC News by phone that she feels abandoned by her own government. Meanwhile, British veterans who fought against terrorism are watching their sacrifices mocked. John Matthews, a decorated Afghanistan veteran, was forced to sell his medals last month to pay heating bills, his pension frozen for 18 months, while bureaucrats process paperwork as Matthews struggles. Foreign aid to questionable regimes increased by £4 billion this year. We're talking luxury conferences in Dubai, fact-finding missions to Caribbean resorts, consultancy fees that dwarf soldier pensions. The contrast is so obscene, so morally bankrupt, that even Labour's traditional union supporters are demanding answers. Sarah Williams, whose son died in Helmand Province, put it simply, "My boy gave everything for this country. Now they betray his allies while I can't afford his headstone." Her petition demanding Starmer's resignation gained 800,000 signatures in 6 hours. Working class communities feel abandoned while metropolitan elites lecture about international solidarity. Here's where it gets really interesting. British Muslims are also turning against Starmer, but not for reasons you'd expect. Prominent Islamic leaders warned his policies would increase extremism, not reduce it. Imam Abdullah Mohammed from Birmingham Central Mosque issued a remarkable statement. Starmer's weakness invites radicals who don't represent Islam. Strong nations defending democracy protect moderate Muslims from extremist hijacking. Think about that. Even communities Starmer thought would support him see through the dangerous game he's playing. The Muslim Council of Britain reported receiving hundreds of complaints from members saying Starmer made their situation worse, not better. Young British Muslims fear being associated with extremist positions they don't hold. One Manchester University student said, "He's made us all look like we support terrorism. We don't. We want peace through strength, not capitulation." But then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. King Charles broke 70 years of royal protocol with a public intervention at a Commonwealth reception yesterday evening. He delivered remarks that palace insiders call the most political speech by a monarch since the abdication crisis. Britain's word, Charles declared with unmistakable emphasis, has been our bond for centuries. When we promise protection to allies facing existential threats, that promise is sacred. He paused, looking directly at cameras. Some bonds transcend politics. Some commitments define who we are as a nation. The subtext was devastating for Starr. Constitutional experts immediately recognised the rebuke. Professor Margaret Thornton called it an unprecedented royal warning shot. Palace sources reveal Charles spent hours on secure calls with security chiefs, genuinely alarmed about Britain's damaged credibility. The optics are catastrophic for Labour. When your own king suggests you've broken Britain's word, your authority evaporates. Senior courtiers whisper that Charles considered even stronger language, but was talked down by advisers fearing a constitutional crisis. One source described the king as more animated than during the Harry and Meghan saga. His Majesty believes Starmer has damaged something fundamental about Britain's character, the source revealed. And then Prince William entered the fray. The future king posted on official accounts, "Britain's strength comes from standing with allies against those who would destroy freedom." Royal watchers immediately decoded the message. William just publicly contradicted the Prime Minister. Never in modern history have both current and future monarchs simultaneously opposed a sitting government. Princess Catherine reportedly urged William to speak out after receiving messages from military families. She was in tears, there's a palace source confirmed. These are families she's personally supported, whose sacrifices now seem meaningless. Even Prince Edward, typically silent on politics, wore his military medals to a public event yesterday. The symbolism was unmistakable. The entire royal family stands against Starmer's betrayal. The international response was immediate and brutal. Biden's administration issued a statement within hours expressing deep concern about Britain's reliability as an ally. The Pentagon suspended 3 joint operations pending review. But here's what hasn't been reported yet. France and Germany held emergency calls discussing whether Britain could remain in intelligence sharing agreements. The Five Eyes Alliance convened without Britain for the first time ever. Canada's Trudeau, typically diplomatic, called Starmer's decision deeply troubling and inconsistent with democratic values. Australia went further. Prime Minister Albanese said Britain appears to have lost its moral compass entirely. Wall Street reacted instantly. Sterling crashed 4% against the dollar. The FTSE dropped 300 points in minutes. Goldman Sachs downgraded Britain's stability rating. But the political destruction was worse. 47 Labour MPs signed an emergency letter demanding Starmer reverse course. The Times revealed a WhatsApp group called Save Labour had grown to include half the parliamentary party. Shadow cabinet members are openly interviewing for leadership positions. Hashtag Starmer out trended globally for 14 straight hours. Street protests erupted in Manchester, Birmingham and Glasgow. Not just Conservatives, but lifelong Labour voters carrying signs reading, "Not in our name," and "Starmer betrayed Britain." YouGov's emergency poll showed Labour's support collapsing to 19%, the lowest in party history. 78% said Starmer damaged Britain's reputation. Even among Labour voters, 56% wanted him gone immediately. The economic cascade continues accelerating. Major defence contractors announced hiring freezes, citing uncertainty about British contracts. The stock market crashed 12%. Rolls-Royce warned of potential layoffs. The pound fell to its lowest level since Liz Truss's mini-budget disaster. Foreign investment dried up overnight. Japanese firms postponed British expansion plans. Saudi sovereign funds withdrew $2 billion from London markets. The city estimates £40 billion of damage in 72 hours. One investment banker called it Star's Black Wednesday, but infinitely worse. Pension funds are bleeding value, retirement savings evaporating. Middle England watches their futures disappear because Starmer chose ideology over stability. Inside number 10, sources describe complete pandemonium. Ministers are openly discussing succession. While Starmer remains in office, David Lammy was overheard telling aides to prepare alternative foreign policy papers. Rachel Reeves has cancelled all public appearances, allegedly meeting shadow leadership candidates. Angela Rayner, typically Starmer's defender, gave an interview calling the situation deeply troubling and refusing to endorse her boss's position. WhatsApp groups with names like Post-Star Planning and Emergency Response Team are coordinating the coup. The question isn't if they'll strike, it's whether Starmer survives the weekend. One senior minister texted colleagues, "He's destroyed us. Either he goes or we all go down with him." Starmer looked haggard at yesterday's press briefing. Sources say he hasn't slept since Netanyahu's broadcast. His hands shook, reading prepared statements. Twice he lost his train of thought mid-sentence. The man who promised competent leadership is falling apart publicly. But wait, because there's another layer to this catastrophe. Security services are investigating whether Starmer was compromised by foreign influence. The sudden policy shift alarmed counterintelligence officials who noticed unusual patterns in Starmer's communications, encrypted messages to unknown recipients, meetings with no official records, financial transfers to organisations with questionable connections. MI5 opened a formal investigation yesterday. If Starmer received foreign money or influence for this policy, he faces more than resignation. We're talking criminal prosecution, imprisonment, the complete destruction of Labour Party credibility for a generation. But here's the revelation that could end everything immediately. Leaked Foreign Office documents show Starmer ignored explicit warnings from intelligence services about arms embargo consequences. MI6's assessment was stark. Cutting military support would embolden terrorist groups across the region. The Joint Intelligence Committee warned of increased threats to British interests globally. Most damning, America's CIA director personally called Starmer, warning this decision would fracture the special relationship. If these documents are authentic, and diplomatic sources confirm they are, then Starmer knowingly damaged national security for political ideology. Think about what that means. He chose virtue signalling over British lives. The optics of that would be absolutely devastating. These aren't policy disagreements anymore. This is potential grounds for immediate removal under national security provisions. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is positioning himself as the statesman Starmer failed to be. While Labour implodes, Sunak delivered a measured speech supporting Israel's right to defence. He looked prime ministerial while Starmer appears increasingly unhinged. Britain must stand with democracies against terrorism, Sunak declared to standing ovations. Abandoning allies in their darkest hour isn't British values. The contrast couldn't be sharper. For the first time since losing power, Conservatives lead every poll. Sunak isn't just opposition leader anymore, he's government in waiting. His shadow cabinet is preparing detailed reversal plans for every Starmer policy. Reform UK surged to 21%, their highest ever polling. Nigel Farage called for immediate elections, saying Britain cannot survive 3 more months of Starmer, let alone 3 years. The political realignment is unprecedented. Traditional Labour strongholds are flipping Conservative overnight. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical. Parliament returns for an emergency session tomorrow. No confidence motions are being drafted. The King has cleared his schedule for urgent meetings. Intelligence chiefs demand explanations. Allies question commitments. Markets brace for further crashes. The question is no longer whether Starmer survives. It's how much damage he inflicts before falling. Britain is watching its government disintegrate in real time. This crisis will be studied for decades as the fastest prime ministerial collapse in history. At its epicentre stands Karma, who looks increasingly like a man who destroyed his party, betrayed allies and shattered Britain's reputation in just 72 hours. Not since Chamberlain's appeasement has a British leader so catastrophically misread global threats. Tomorrow morning, Labour MPs meet to decide whether to formally withdraw support. If 20 more defect, the government falls automatically. So here's the question that matters. Did Starmer just commit the greatest foreign policy blunder in British history? Did Netanyahu's broadcast end Labour's government before it barely began? Or could Starr somehow survive what looks like political annihilation? What do you think? Will King Charles intervene further if Starmer refuses to resign? Could we see a national government formed to restore Britain's credibility? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to see what's really happening in Westminster right now. The mainstream media won't tell you the full truth, but we will. Tomorrow's emergency session could witness the end of Starr's career. Don't miss what happens. The emergency session opened under extraordinary security. Armed police lined the corridors of Westminster as MPs filed in, many avoiding eye contact with the press. The atmosphere was not political theatre, it was panic management. Senior civil servants briefed committee chairs behind closed doors, warning that intelligence partners were withholding updates in real time. One official described the situation as flying blind while storms gather on every horizon. Britain, once a central node in global decision-making, was suddenly reduced to a spectator. Inside the chamber, Starmer's allies attempted damage control, but the numbers no longer added up. One by one, MPs rose to speak, not in defence, but in disbelief. Veteran backbenchers warned that the party was facing electoral extinction. Younger MPs spoke openly about doorsteps turning hostile overnight. Constituency offices were flooded with calls, not from activists, but from lifelong supporters demanding answers. Several MPs admitted privately they had stopped wearing party badges in public. Then came the legal shockwave. Former Supreme Court justices appeared on evening broadcasts outlining potential constitutional mechanisms for removal under national security doctrine. Their language was careful, but the implication was unmistakable. This was no longer just political failure, it was possible dereliction. Opposition lawyers began drafting emergency injunctions to compel disclosure of intelligence warnings allegedly ignored. If forced into the open, those documents could shatter what little credibility remained. Behind the scenes, the civil service moved into contingency mode. Draft orders were prepared to stabilise markets in the event of a leadership collapse. The Bank of England coordinated with international counterparts to prevent further currency freefall. One Treasury source admitted the government was operating on borrowed hours, not days. If there's another shock, he said, we don't have the buffer anymore. Public trust continued to erode by the minute. Evening news footage showed candlelight vigils outside military memorials, families holding photographs of fallen soldiers. The message was not partisan, it was moral outrage. Veterans groups issued joint statements condemning what they called the abandonment of allies and the erosion of deterrence. Police reported record attendance at spontaneous demonstrations, many entirely unaffiliated with political parties. Internationally, the isolation deepened. Emergency summits proceeded without British representation. Policy statements were issued that once would have carried London's fingerprints, but now did not mention Britain at all. A senior NATO official, speaking anonymously, said allies were recalibrating assumptions that had held since the Cold War. Reliability, he said, isn't a slogan, it's a record. And records matter. As night fell, rumours spread through Westminster of an imminent resignation speech. Staffers were seen carrying boxes from ministerial offices. Speechwriters were summoned, dismissed, then summoned again. At one point, Downing Street lights went dark before flaring back on, feeding speculation of a deal struck and then collapsed. Journalists camped outside Number 10 reported hearing shouting through open windows. Meanwhile, the opposition prepared for every outcome. Draft caretaker government framework circulated quietly. Names were floated, tested, withdrawn. The monarchy's private secretaries worked overtime, mapping constitutional pathways that had not been seriously considered in generations. Britain was no longer debating policy direction. It was grappling with institutional survival. By dawn, one truth had become unavoidable. The damage was no longer theoretical. It was measurable, visible, and accelerating. Confidence, once lost, does not return on command. Allies remember. Markets remember. History remembers. Whatever happened next, the era that began with promises of competence and stability was ending in fragmentation and distrust. And as Parliament prepared to reconvene, one question hung heavier than all the rest. Not who would lead next or which party would survive, but whether Britain could reclaim the authority it had just watched slip through its fingers. The answer the coming hours would reveal would define not just a government, but a generation.